meet my bride. Let's go for a ride in my newfangled automobile. Just where we will go, nobody knows, but it's sure a great way to feel. Behind the wheel of the speed meter steel, it's my newfangled automobile.
Hello and welcome to Vintage Car History. I'm Wild Bill. Now, engineering is a very multifaceted discipline. Like medical doctors or lawyers, there are many different specialties that can be found amongst engineers. Mining, civil, electrical, mechanical, software, aeronautical, and many more types of engineers. Yet there is one thing common amongst all engineers. Their job is to find solutions to various problems. And more often than not, this involves inventing things. And there was one particular engineer that invented things to solve problems across many industries, including the early automotive, Arthur Krebs. Born in the small town of Vesoul, France in 1850, Arthur Constantin Krebs was truly born to be an engineer. From an early age, he was tinkering, taking apart whatever contraption he could find to discover its secrets. Indeed, by the age of 18, he had even built a road-going vehicle, a steam dray similar to what Etienne Lenoir had built. He was working on his engineering degree when the Franco-Prussian War broke out, and he was called into military service. He entered the French Army Corps of Engineers and excelled. His interests expanded into electricity and internal combustion engines, and young Arthur experimented with both in his spare time. In 1876, while still in the Army, he met another man, a Monsieur Charles Renault, a fellow Army engineer, and the two would become long-standing friends. Krebs would remain in the Army as a reserve officer for nearly 20 years, eventually reaching the rank of Commandant, a title he would retain throughout his life. During his time in the Army, Krebs had seen the Germans use tethered balloons to much effect, conducting surveillance out of the reach of French artillery. He and Renault had decided to try and make a balloon that could be driven, a Zeppelin. They accomplished the feat in 1884, building what they christened La France. This was a gas-filled balloon some 167 feet long and had a large, narrow gondola, or car as they called it, being itself a bit over 100 feet long and made from bamboo and silk. It was electric-powered with batteries and motor in the middle, driving a front-mounted propeller. Rudders were to the rear, and trim weights could be slid along the car to keep the craft level. They took off from a parade ground near Paris, flew around for a spell, and then returned. It was the first controlled, powered flight in history. Soon afterwards, Krebs turned his genius towards things nautical, theorizing that if an electric power system could move an airship, could it also do likewise underwater? And so, along with the highly regarded engineer Gustave Zille, designed and built what can be described as the first modern submarine, the Gimeo. This was an all-electric boat that had things like a periscope, the first to do so, and even had an electromagnetic gyro compass to not only navigate, but also keep the boat in trim while underwater, both invented by Krebs. She was armed with 2 torpedoes, designed by Zille, and served in the French Navy for some 20 years. Though she was used primarily for training, she was a spectacle of the time, as well as the dirigible that Arthur had built, and were quite inspiring. Indeed, a young author by the name of Jules Verne would be inspired by both of these inventions and would eventually write books based on them, including 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. In 1884, the City Council of Paris asked Krebs to analyze the city fire departments and come up with ways to improve their effectiveness. He traveled across Europe and the US, studying various methods used for fighting fires, and came up with a plan to make an underground water system that could have outlets or fire hydrants all over the city, so that, if a fire occurs, high-pressure water would be available without having to haul the water to the site of the fire. It was the first of its kind, and was and still is the model for firefighting across the world today. It was in 1896 that Krebs would enter the world of cars. He invented and patented the electric clutch assembly, and Emile Levasseur was very interested. Emile brought Krebs into the Panhard and Levasseur company as an engineer, as well as buying the license for his new clutch. Unfortunately, Levasseur passed away less than a year later due to complications from an earlier racing accident, and René Panhard soon named Commander Krebs as his successor. Krebs left the army to take up the chief engineering position at Panhard, and he began to invent new innovations that can be found on cars to this day. One of his first projects with P&L was to improve steering. Emile Levasseur was the first to equip a car with a steering wheel as opposed to a tiller or handlebars, yet there wasn't anything particularly different about the steering below the wheel. Krebs invented the modern steering gear to address this. With his steering gear, the steering column could be installed at an angle, rakishly going under the dashboard to the gear assembly. Additionally, his steering gear would only hold the turn as long as the driver held the wheel. If the driver let go, the car would return to driving straight. Go ahead, find an open space to drive, go into a tight turn, and then let go of your steering wheel. The steering wheel will return on its own to put the car back into driving straight forward. Commandant Krebs invented this feature that is on your car. Arthur would invent many more automotive components that continue in some form to this day. The automatic membrane carburetor, which keeps the air-fuel mixture constant during acceleration. The dyno engine testing system to automatically calculate both the horsepower and torque throughout the RPM of an engine. Modern shock absorbers as opposed to dampers that were most common at the time. The list is long. He even went to the U.S. personally in 1906 to testify on Ford's behalf during the Selden patent trial. Commandant Arthur Krebs left a lasting mark on the automotive industry worldwide and other industries as well. So, if there is ever a fire at your home, know that the firefighters will arrive in fire trucks using his pumping engines, steering, and will use water from hydrants that the good commandant caused to be placed in cities around the world. Thanks for watching Vintage Car History, and we'll see you next week. Peace.